Welcome to Truth Stream. Today we are here with SJ. He prefers to remain anonymous at this point. And we're going to be talking about his background in the Mormon Church and his and a few other intriguing topics. So without further ado, welcome to the show, SJ.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys having me here. And yeah, I hope to bring as much insight as possible, especially about me being an ex-Mormon, being 25 plus years within what was known as an organized religion, but what I would say is also a cult. I know some people might take that to heart. I hope that they don't. I want this to be a very open-minded discussion because, and for your listeners to kind of open their minds up to certain things, because there's a lot of truth behind the scenes, behind closed doors that we do not
Yes.
experience, especially as members of the Mormon Church. So, yeah, if you want, I can go into, pretty much where I come from and, my background to start with, and then maybe go into that Mormonism category because even though it's less than 1% of the world population, it's still a big number. It's a huge thing out in the West. And I think people really need to be educated on this because there's a lot of certain things that are abusive behavior that gets away, in terms of these religions. And there's certain secrets that should be exposed to those
Yes.
that are not familiar with the topic.
Yeah, and also hypocrisy and also and then how maybe let people know, and I think you'll get into this, how far you went up, so to speak, in the church so that they can see how much you really saw, your inside perspective on this. So yeah, please go right. And I think people can also make this applicable to, in some ways, a lot of other either cults or organized religions, etc. So even if
Correct.
we're being Mormon centric, if you will, I think this is
Yes.
very applicable. So please go.
This would be very applicable to Jehovah Witnesses, Scientology, a lot of these niche religions that to the normal public would seem odd or kind of outlandish, but really it all does kind of connect, and especially with Freemason, with or how it originated. So me
Yeah.
personally, I was a convert at age 14. Me being a Canadian citizen, I've always been in Canada, traveled all around Canada, but I originally joined the age of 14. Convert really means that you didn't grow up within the church. It's more so that I was invited within the church. I knew people that were already members of the church, and so through them, spoke to missionaries. Missionaries are those who recruit those to become Mormon. You don't necessarily need to know someone on the inside. This is something where missionaries go door to door. They will try to approach those that are maybe not active members or those that have no idea about the religion. And then they will try to educate you to let you know that this is 100% the true religion of the world, that this is the number one like truth factor. And they are very good in their words in making it seem it's very inviting, God loving, spiritual practice that anyone could be a part of. So at age 14, I got involved because my best friend was involved with the church. He was born in the church. And I've always had this closeness with God in terms of my morals and values. Um, at age 14, I then got baptized in the church. First, you go through kind of like these pre screenings with the missionaries to make sure that you have at least the kind of like the basics down, even though there was so much more to this religion in terms of Mormonism. They only give you a fraction, just a taste kind of what it's like. And they tell you that everything is positive, everything's good. Um, and they like to keep you in that sort of like-minded state, that this is a true good church to attend and practice, and that it's good especially for your family because it's very family orientated.
Right.
um, Now, me moving forward, I've kind of like my background. Like I was, my parents were divorced at a certain age, like when I was 4. There was a lot of, um, hiccups in terms of life progression and not having a stable father figure. He passed away at a certain age as well. And so, living even with adoptive parents at some point. So Mormonism, they what the leaders like to say, they say that this is a church where it's almost, think of it as like a hospital. That you go there spiritually wounded, and they are there to heal you. But one thing they do not mention is that they also tend to create the problem as well as the solution.
Of
So
course.
it goes back and forth in that sense, and it makes it very confusing for those who kind of just follow the prophets, follow the leaders of the church, and do as they say, because these
Real quick on that
yeah,
topic, isn't that what we saw with the jab, if you will? They're always creating. They have the solution right around for the
Yeah, the
problem.
Hegelian dialectic.
Thank you, thank you,
Problem, reaction, solution.
thank
Yeah,
you.
I mean,
yes,
they've been using it forever. Yeah.
yes, and that's when cognitive dissonance, or the separation of fact and what you truly believe or feel. There's a separation there, and that's where I think it's that tight line where you have to then decide, okay, is this really true, or am I just going to keep following and doing what I'm supposed to be told that that I'm due from, whether it's the prophet or the God, or the Godhead. So Mormons, and I don't mean to go off topic here, but Mormons do believe in God. They believe in Jesus Christ. They will say that they're a Christian church. There's a lot of stuff like that. What people don't realize is that Mormonism does fall from, the Masons. The Masons are the ones who are kind of like the head of what you could call the pyramid in the religious aspect. But in terms of where, a lot of our temple rituals come from, a lot of our church meetings, a lot of things that we do in particular, does originate prior to that. And I'll get into that more so, after, I talk about a bit about myself here, going back to the original founders like Joseph Smith and Brigham Young. But I now, in terms of progression, I when I was 14, you don't have very much say in terms of like the priesthood. Priesthood is something that's only ordained to a man, not a woman. And the man is supposed to be kind of like that traditional, head of the household. It's like, God communicates to the man then, gives out orders or whatnot. I know everyone's different in terms of members. Again, I know a lot of active members may not totally agree with what I'm saying. They call it anti-Mormon, or they disregard it completely and say, no, I am still following what I'm following. And that's totally up to the listener, I think, today, in terms of this segment here. But again, opening your mind to any possibility will help you understand more about real life situations, about real life things that could affect your family long term, and even your relationships, whether it's with people or even with God. So if you're in that Christian notion thinking, well, I feel strongly about, the Mormon church, well, just hear me out here in terms of this, because I've been through a lot of it, and I'll get to that here shortly. So got to the point of Melchizedek priesthood. Now, within Masons, they usually go up by like degrees. So you would have someone who's head of that lodge, 33rd degree Mason. That's supposedly like the top for that lodge. I don't know 100% how to get to the 33rd degree Mason, in that status, but there is a lot of theory around that there are certain things you have to do in order to achieve that status. Now, that's relating that to Mormonism. You can go. There's certain priesthoods that you go up to. So, as a man, I am then allowed to have the priesthood. I've gone up to the Melchizedek priesthood. Melchizedek priesthood is like the one underneath, I think, from um, like the actual like elder, like priest elder or whatnot, where you're and it really goes by age. It doesn't necessarily go by, what you're doing per se or how long you've been in it. It's more by age. You are then given the Melchizedek priesthood. So I was given that at age 18. As a Melchizedek priesthood, I am allowed to like bless others in terms of like certain like I'd have a vial of oil that I could use, and to say someone's hurt or whatnot, I could go to them. There's certain words we should follow in terms of those prayers or blessings that we do. And again, this sounds great. I mean, who wouldn't want to heal someone, whether it's spiritual or emotional? You're giving someone a blessing who you think is through God, and that all is well in terms of this. Now, what gets interesting is within that time frame, there's certain things you do have to go through in order to be approved for that calling. So even though it goes by age, you don't automatically get it. For example, between the age of 14 and 18, they had to see if I was a worthy priesthood holder in order to have entrance to the temple, which would then be, they kind of give you like a card that would go with your name. It would be input in their system. And they say, yes, he is a worthy priesthood holder. He has his temple recommend, as they call it. And you have to show this at the front desk of a temple if you were to go to a Latter-day Saint temple, Mormon, as you will, to show this in order to proceed. So those are certain things that you kind of have to go by. If you don't have that, you have to go through your bishop. That's, again, something else. So in order to obtain this, you have to sit in a room with an older gentleman, someone you might not even know. And usually they're the bishop or the statehood or state priesthood, someone who's above the bishop. And so you talk to these people, usually it's your bishop, and they'll ask you a certain, questions that you have to kind of go through in order to be approved for this. They ask you, do you believe that Joseph Smith is a worthy priesthood holder and the prophet of God? They'll ask you certain questions in terms of, is there anything that you're doing against the church that, would be unworthy? But there are times where they'll ask you sexual questions. They'll go into your type of past and they'll say, have you been sexually active, this sort of thing. The problem here is, you could see this as, if it was black and white, you could see it as, oh, they're just making sure that you're following, kind of like the laws that have been given to us by God, that we're not sinning and doing, these things that would go against them. But in actuality, the Mormon Church has been they've gotten in trouble for this, and they've kind of changed it a bit as they go along, so to speak. Even though the prophet says that they are the leaders of the church, they say, oh, we know Revelation, or like, kind of like the future, what that holds. We might, they kind of give you that wording to say, yeah, we talked to Jesus, we might have talked to him here or there, like in this private room, that sort of thing. So these are supposed to be people that you would trust, almost as if you go back in the Bible and Jesus has his 12 disciples, this is kind of like what they're trying to showcase. Like these, you have John the Baptist, those kind of people. Well, these are just as worthy as people, if not more worthy, in that kind of interpretation. So the problem is when you get through these questions, you have older men in a room with younger women. Okay, this applies to both women and men. Doesn't matter about the priesthood per se, because anyone's allowed to go in the temple as long as you're a member. But you have to be a worthy member. Okay, so with the woman per se, they might be 13, 14, and they're being asked sexual questions. In some cases, they want details. Now, a lot of the times the church doesn't like certain things exposed, but they've had times in the past where these people who are being asked these questions that you would think is someone, that loves and, believes in God, and they might very well do, but this is what the church needs to have is, things, I guess, about your sexual orientation and, where you come from, that sort of thing, what you've been involved in.
Are they really looking more for dirt than to help you?
Um, yes and no. It all depends on the person, I would say. But there is a lot of cases. What I'm really trying to get at here is there's a lot of cases of child abuse.
Oh,
You
jeez.
have people coming into these offices, talking to these people, and you could full well say, well, that's just them. It's not the church in a whole. Well, the church kind of sets it up in that sense where it's almost like they're enabling that type of behavior. If you put an older man in with a younger woman and you have to you're asking these certain things. I mean, my wife and I, before we went to the temple to be married, they ask tons of sexual questions, more so where my wife ran out the door crying because they wanted to know all the things, all the details, very sexual details that do, I feel was inappropriate.
Well, it's not. It's really none of their business. I mean, what do they feel is necessary to get out of the information in order to do what with the information?
Yeah, I thought you just had to kill a drifter and you were in. I don't
Yeah,
see why they
Jeez.
gotta get in your
Yeah,
pants.
it's called a private life for a reason.
exactly. So, and so the churches has been getting in type of trouble where people have been noticing a lot of these abuse cases and how the church kind of hides it. They don't want it in the light of things to say, oh yeah, we got caught with this. No, they're, if anything, I would say it's a very narcissist kind of view to kind of push it back or not say anything at all. Not acknowledge the problem at hand. But when so many people, the members of the church, full tithe payers that get the church,
Right.
where the status is today, they do have to make these changes in order to make them feel a little more comfortable in that element. So they've added another person within those interviews so that you have two people and one kind of supervising because they've run into a lot of these sexual abuse cases. A lot of it has to do with, unfortunately, bishops, which is kind of a smaller time thing, within the church. Again, not every bishop does this. I know a lot of good bishops out there. I know a lot of good members out there. But just like as in the Masons, you can look at the similarities where there's certain things where it's not talked about, so they just think it's all good, right? Unless you do your own research, unless you experience things for yourself, you're not going to know otherwise. You might even shrug it off to say, oh, they're just overreacting, make excuses for it. And that's where it kind of goes down that tunnel where, people start to question more things. And questioning is something that they obviously don't want more of. They want them, just don't ask as many questions, just follow the prophet. You'll
They
know what
want
to
to ask a shitload of questions of you and your sexual life.
do. Exactly. That's exactly it.
It's ridiculous.
So I didn't mean to go too far into that, but I do want to
Oh, but
make it
thank you.
known. Yeah, I do want to make it known that this has been a problem for some time. You have older men interviewing younger women, and then cases where they sexually abuse them, and then a lot of the members kind of going, oh, that couldn't be bishop so and so, oh, it couldn't have been that, and they make excuses for it, and then it really damages the person who was involved, right? Like
Right.
they've been discredited or whatnot. So I just want to make kind of that out there to say, not all the time can we trust and can we really put forth, in terms of truth when it comes to certain people within the church, because some people are protected, some people they are kind of enabled in this situation where it's like, oh, maybe now that I'm asking these questions, maybe I'll ask a little bit more. Maybe I'll just continue down this road and see where it leads to. Everyone looks at me in terms of my status of a bishop or whatnot as good, so why would they question me on this sort of thing?
So,
Um,
Biden family.
yeah, exactly. So now to get into the good stuff here, because again, I just wanted to make that known to the listeners here. But between the ages of 14 and 18, you then you start to experience the temple, just a fragment of it. And what that is baptizing for the dead. So, baptizing for the dead, I'm sure, is a question for many people who are not Mormon because it already sounds creepy as it is. And trust me, it is a little bit. But what they like to do in terms of that is baptize those who have not been baptized in their life, in their lifetime, span or whatnot, of them living on the earth. Instead, they miss that opportunity. And so they go into the afterlife, and then we record their names, and then we baptize on behalf of them so that they may progress into the highest kingdom where God resides. So you think, okay, like I'm doing a service for God here, even though it's kind of weird. I'm baptizing for, Joe something or other back in 1842 when he died. I'm going to do this for them because, I truly believe that, I want everyone to be with their families in the highest kingdom of heaven, and that you wouldn't want to be in a degree lower because you miss that opportunity for baptism, right? So it kind of allows that extended hand, or yeah, the extended hand to kind of say, hey, you still have a second chance here, even in the afterlife, to progress and to get to where Joseph Smith is, to get where God and Jesus is, that sort of thing. So baptizing for the dead, they make you dress up all in white. Okay. In most cases, you're nude underneath this white suit. It's kind of like a white jumpsuit. Something, probably the best comparison I can use is what you would see in, a movie where they have the orange jumpsuit, in jails. And so that's the type of outfit you'd wear, but it's completely white. Now, white can be see-through. Unfortunately, and I don't know if they've changed this now, but unfortunately, you would see a lot of people through that, whether woman or man. In some cases, I don't know if you're allowed to like wear your what they call magic underwear, which is also your garments. But more so, like I remember me being in it, I was completely nude, and I know a lot others were too. And when you're being baptized in a baptismal font within the temple, and you're doing the service, when you come out of it, people can see a lot of stuff. So I don't know why it's like that per se, why we would need to see that,
Well, the
but it
fact that
is a
you're questioning it alone means that there's a bit of awkwardness probably to the
Yeah.
situation.
absolutely. And then if you're not used to this, so here's the thing that I've really learned with Mormonism: the more you practice it, and this is very encouraged by the leadership, and people you looked up to even in the church, they say keep going to the temple, keep doing these things, you're doing the work of God. But then you realize, hey, like I'm actually desensitizing myself going through these certain rituals, or the baptisms. So when I first actually got there, luckily I was with some friends that I knew, and they were able to help me understand in that sense. But if I were to listen to my moral compass, it was going haywire. I do not feel good about this, let alone baptizing for the dead. It just doesn't sit right with me, you know? And I think that was a warning sign that many people ignore once you get
Very,
deeper
yeah,
into
very
this
much
religion.
so.
Um, and that's the thing too, like your family is usually involved in this sort of thing. So when you have family members, your brothers and sisters, people that are older than you, maybe you have like a favorite youth leader that's in the church that you look up to, and you're asking all these questions, they can kind of help you, try to get away from that whole feeling that you're having inside, and say, okay, I guess maybe it is normal, and I think we're seeing that a lot today too with extremists, with certain agendas that are being, um, kind of shown in our faces, where we're forced to see it more so, and they're trying to normalize certain ideas that really is inappropriate, or something that I don't think God would approve of. So baptisms for the dead was something I definitely experienced. That's the start of anyone who enters the temple. You have oxen that hold up the baptismal font. It's like a marble. font in most cases. I know every font is different, but usually they do have the oxen. Usually they have the 12 oxen that represents the, I think the 12 disciples. Um, I know 100% the meaning behind it, but I do believe that is the case in terms of that meaning. Whether it could mean something else, I'm not 100% sure. It is a little weird though, in terms of how it's set up. Doesn't feel like it's a spiritual, practice that enlightens you. It's more like, this is something like a burden or something heavy that really, it doesn't make sense to your first, second time even going. But as I desensitized myself going through this, there are then other aspects to the temple that we then experience. So you can then, like as a Melchizedek priesthood, I can then talk to my bishop. Usually missionaries or the bishop will come to me too if I don't really say anything, and they say, "Oh, this person isn't endowed." So endowment is another step up. Endowment is not only are you a member of the church, but now you're actually committing yourself fully by like a spiritual promise to God that you will not go away from the church. You will always follow what the leaders have to say. And if you do not, then you will be punished
This sounds
in
like
terms of that.
grooming and mind control, and it's just and you don't notice it because you think you're doing the right thing. It's just
Exactly. And that's why a lot of
it's creepy,
people.
frankly. It's creepy.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why I was able to see certain things as a convert rather than if you're born into it. Imagine having generations of family
Oh,
within this religion. You're born into it. They make you go up on the podium on Testimony Day, which happens, I think, one Sunday out of the month. I think it's usually the last Sunday of the month, where you have testimony meeting. It's like a full hour of people going up and sharing their testimonies. Well, it is encouraged that if you are, say, you have a small child, that you want to bring them up there, you want to tell them what they should say. And in most cases, if you look at the testimonies, most cases they say, "I know Joseph Smith is a prophet of God." Now, why would you need to say that over and over and over again? Well, it's kind of like what you're saying in terms of that brainwashing mind control. And again, members of the church might disagree with this, but it is 100% a fact that you have people saying this over and over and over and over again. And what is a child going to think if they hear something repeated by its closest family members, like
that
their
it's the truth.
friends?
Yeah.
That's how things should be, and it's the truth.
And how early they start
Oh,
by saying it. So this is something that circulates in their mind as they're growing and they're becoming educated as a person, right? So they just go right out of the gates and say, "Okay, I know Joseph Smith is a prophet of God. Well, why is he a prophet of God?" You know, and they'll give a simple answer. They won't go in the history of Joseph Smith, and that's something I want to showcase next here in terms of that is, where Joseph Smith kind of like his background and stuff, and really give like a true interpretation of his background because the church tends to only mention good things or things that have just been kind of twisted a bit to make you think otherwise, where it's like, no, Joseph Smith was 100% a prophet, even though there's a lot of questioning things he's done. The church will not bring that up because that will then question the faith. Um, but yeah, something sorry, going back to just my background there, I've gone through the endowment ceremony. Very odd, but mainly the uniform is different than baptism for the dead, where you're in that kind of white jumpsuit. In endowments, it's very close to the Masons, what they wear in terms of these things. They have like again, it's in white. I mean, the guys have kind of like the chef hat, weird looking thing. The women have like veils that go over their faces. Um, the green, it's like a green kind of, I don't know, it goes over your waist, and it's kind of like to show like the Adam and Eve sort of thing on like covering yourself when nude. I mean, it goes on and on and on, sort of thing. I don't want to get too much detail of that because I'm not 100% knowledgeable within those details. Because again, I am a convert, but I've experienced enough where I know, in terms of those, like I said, 25 years, uh, enough to go, this is obviously way out to lunch and probably more confusing to those that even do ask questions about it. So they just don't ask questions at all. They just do what they're told.
That's a
Um,
long time. 25 years. That's a long time.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Right. So, and it's weird with Mormonism because once you start, something goes off in your mind, kind of like a spark that goes off in your mind to say, wait a sec, like let's put on the brakes here because I've just been just following this whole time, kind of being ignorant to the outside world, because I'm just following who I trust, which is family, friends, and leaders.
Well, that's like most people, even outside of religion, that just trust the media and their doctors,
Exactly.
their friends, and why would you believe the small percent of people that are questioning things? It's like, well, because we have we have your best interest in mind. But anyway, I had a
Yeah,
a parallel out.
exactly. So when I went through endowment, I went through with my wife because we were engaged at the time. And in order to be sealed in the temple, which is a marriage in the temple, you have to first be endowed, which is a more promising type of way of saying, yes, I'm going to stay with the church. And if I leave, well, I'm at risk in the afterlife, sort of thing. So when I got endowed, there are many things that you must remember in terms of handshakes, in terms of sayings. And again, this all stems from Masonry, like the Freemasons and what they do in terms of that to get to that kind of that highest glory in heaven. Now, you're given a name when you have this endowment. Now, what people don't know is that names are given according to the date and time that you go in. So my name might the given name that to me might actually be the same as someone else if they came in on the same day as me. So everyone's kind of given that same day, and they have it all pre-recorded in terms of the dates and what name you'd go by. So it's not like a revelation from God saying this is your true name. Kind of like what Jesus did back in the New Testament. He went to his disciples. He said, "Well, John, now you're Peter," that sort of thing. He gave them certain names. Well, Mormonism's really good with copying that sort of thing, but if there's that little thing in the background that goes, wait a sec, so this is a pre-recorded names, you're not just giving me based off of some spiritual guidance that you received. So the date and time I went in, I received the name Moroni, which is a huge name in Mormonism. He's Captain Moroni. If anyone knows about Captain Moroni, he was like the Hercules sort of deal. He was top soldier, very like if I were to think of anyone who could portray him, it'd be like Dwayne the Rock Johnson, for example, like
I
his
knew you were going to
stature,
say that. That's
Yeah.
so.
right? Yeah, exactly. So and he is known to be a very spiritual, loving person as well as a soldier of God. So he's way high up there in the ranks. So me thinking, following this religion, I'm thinking, wow, like the name I was given was Moroni. Like this is insane. Like I must be like maybe I'll become a leader of the church someday or something. It just kind of plays with your mind like that. But then you look
They
into it
sound like they're
further.
really good at that.
Exactly. And they whisper the name in your ear. You're not allowed to expose the name to anyone. Obviously, because if I were to talk to someone I just went in endowment with and they're a male, they're going to have probably the same name as me because they were just in my endowment session, right?
Oh, right.
So, but I went with my wife. She received that name for the day. I received that name for the day. We walked out of there. And the thing is, it's so weird. Um, so I think it's okay for the man to know the woman's name, but the woman can absolutely not know the man's name.
Oh, of course.
So so there's a lot of biased, type of things there. Like really, you're not supposed to have to say the name whatsoever. But I think in terms of the man, they still can. It's you wouldn't get in trouble per se. But if the man were to say to the woman, well, you're definitely getting in trouble for that. Even though again, this is all pre-recorded sort of thing where it's like, oh yeah, everyone knows my name, but it's so secret that we can't tell. And then that again, it probably goes back to them being exposed for having these list names already pre-listed, and then everyone figuring out, wait a sec, this isn't like some spiritual thing. This is just you trying to deceive us with names, thinking that we're special within the church. And so, um, yeah, and then so I did go through the endowment. I also went through a sealing in the temple. That's the marriage of the temple. So you have to, in order to get to the highest kingdom of heaven, which is called the celestial kingdom. There's 3 degrees of heaven in Mormonism. You have celestial. I don't know if this is in order. I know celestial is the top, but then there's terrestrial and telestial. And I apologize if I'm saying that wrong. Um, and they say that that lowest degree is where you'd probably find murderers, rapists. So they actually say these people don't go to what is known as outer darkness. That is what you consider hell in the Bible. No, these people are considered at the lowest degree other than outer darkness. People that deserve to go to outer darkness by the church are those that deny the gospel, firsthand sort of thing. Now, there's always the speculation, well, would I be considered one of those to go to outer darkness over, say, like Hitler, who killed, mass amounts of people, and yet he's in just the lowest degree? It's hard to say. There's a lot of theories about it. Mormonism is very good at saying one theory and then switching to a next right away. So I think it's more so what they say is like, say, if the prophet who had met Jesus in a room or something, like the spiritual Jesus, or if like Joseph Smith saw, Jesus and God when he was in the forest and got his revelation, like the idea of how to start a church. If Joseph Smith were to then go, no, I don't believe in that, even though he witnessed God, he would then automatically go to outer darkness. So
Okay.
that's kind of
Just a
to
quick
give you,
question.
yeah.
You So we hear like certain Illuminati whistleblowers, and we've never really looked into the whistleblowers on the Mormon Church, if you will. But have you heard of other Mormon whistleblowers that are speaking out, either at this time or in the past, or is this really somewhat a rare thing? I really don't know.
Yeah, and there are some, like I would say, higher profile whistleblowers out there that really help me in terms of understanding more, trying to figure things out. Because I'm going to be honest with you, when you're so deep into a religion, you will do whatever it takes to kind of keep your mindset on that, because the last thing you want to do is feel like you're being controlled by Satan and his adversary or whatnot, you know, and that you're being taken off that straight and narrow path towards God, right? So I'll list some names here because they are publicly known. Bill Reel and RFM, they do a podcast, Mormonism Live. They're very good with insightful information. Um, Bill Reel, he was a bishop in Utah. He and like him and like RFM, we all do the same thing. We research more and then we come to a conclusion. Is this really believable? Or do I really need to open my mind to this? And usually, like I said, that spark goes off in your mind, where you're out of that trance and you can really think for yourself, despite what everyone else is telling you, and say, no, I know the truth. I know what to really believe here, not what people just keep telling me. Because when you come up with more questions, they start to become dismissive in those questions, or they'll send the missionaries to say, well, we don't really know, but just have faith and go based off your feeling, pray if it's the right church. So a lot of it's feeling, a lot of it's emotional driven, not logical. And so, I know, a lot of people disagree with that too, but it's just how it is. Many of the active members in the church go off of emotional feelings on what is true and what is false. And that's very dangerous to do, right? So, yeah, in terms of that, I was sealed in the temple with my wife. This would be what you would need to do in order to get to the celestial kingdom. Celestial kingdom is where God resides. It's where Jesus Christ resides. and even the prophets of the church. So they say they all reside within the highest of kingdoms. And they say that it's a big family thing, that you want your family to be there with you, not just you. Because if your family per se isn't Mormon, well, they could be in a different degree. And they say that if you're at the highest degree, you can still travel down to those other degrees to visit or whatnot, but they can never come to your highest degree because they're not worthy to go there. So it makes a lot of families kind of deep dive where it'd say, well, we have to be a family in this. I don't want to lose my son or my daughter. Like, and that's where, the LGBTQ community kind of come in, because here's people that think they're sinning and that they're not going to be at the highest degree, even though it's something that they might not even be able to, really help in terms of that, of like, just, you're gay, and then it's like, well, I better be straight, I better have a family, I better do what the leaders tell me, because my family matters over what I really feel like, right? So and again, it just gets kind of messy in terms of that. But being sealed in the temple was very interesting. And now, again, this is all secret stuff. They're not supposed to say anything about, endowments. And I'm kind of going through this a little bit faster than usual, only because there's so much more to it that I think is more helpful for the listener, rather than, kind of figuring all this stuff out. But I do want to go through in terms of my background and being sealed in the temple. um, you get your on your hands and knees, you're holding hands with your wife, you kind of go through this thing where only members of the church can view this wedding. If you are a non-member, your mom or a dad, well, I apologize, but you're going to have to wait outside the temple while your son or daughter is getting married within this church. Same thing happened with my grandma. My grandma is one of the closest family relatives to me. She's non-Mormon. I was a convert, so I was the only one out of my family. And you could only imagine, you walking there by yourself, and then those that in the church. Those that are non-Mormon don't get a free pass. They have to wait until the marriage is done, and then you walk out the door, it says a married couple. So they're missing out on a huge, like a huge piece of their life, where it's like, wow, it's kind of sad that I can't be there to see this. Again, they like to keep things kind of in that, well, they like to say, like it's their secret and they're sacred. I think it's more of a secret than anything.
Well, is
'Cause
there anything that they're not privy to? I mean, does it seem like just a normal wedding ceremony, or is there something else that happens that they're not supposed to see?
it's so weird with the whole thing, because a lot of it just doesn't really make sense. The sealing is supposed to be, you're sealed for this person, not only in this life, but for all eternity, which sounds very ideal for your active Mormon.
Right.
Who wouldn't want to be sealed to their spouse for all eternity? You don't want to lose them in the afterlife and then say, great, well, I didn't get sealed, and now I can't see my wife. And, without my wife, I can't see there being that good of a heaven. You'd want to be with your loved ones to make it a real heaven, I would think, in my mind. So,
Don't you get your own planet in Mormonism? Something along those
yeah.
lines? Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Oh, it'd be a pretty lonely planet without
What?
without a mate.
Is that
I
a real
suppose.
question or a joke?
No, it's real.
no,
Ask them.
it's a real question. Yeah.
Think
So,
about this.
I don't.
uh,
Well, I've never.
Yeah.
I mean, I've lived in
Tell,
Utah.
tell us about the planet real quick. Just the elevator pitch.
no, and yeah, so that's, well, just to end kind of my background there, that's my background. And if I wanted to, I could have become a bishop, so to speak. But bloodline really is the key element there for progressing into the higher degrees, like the Quorum of the 70, the 12 disciples, the prophet. So there are certain things, but those are more family related. You will see as you go up in the tiers that they are more related than not. They like to keep that sort of bloodline there.
Your progress will be blocked if you don't have the correct genetic material.
Or if, and it's kind of like, getting into, I know this is kind of different, but the Illuminati sense, what we we're talking about prior, where you're kind of born into it, right? Now, those that are converted into it, well, better have something very special about them in order to get into that sort of degree or that status quo, as I would say, because they really have to trust you. They really have to feel like these guys aren't going to blow the lid on us and crash this multi-billion-dollar church down, right?
It sounds
So
like
it's
Scientology, except you don't have to spend nearly as much money with Mormonism.
And you get a planet.
correct.
And
That
you
is
get
correct.
Planet.
yeah, I
Yes.
mean, all you get with the Scientology is you get rid of your thetans, right?
Well, I'm
You don't
not.
know about the thetans either?
I don't. I
Yeah.
don't think so.
Xenu and the Great Volcano. That'll be another show, but
Yeah.
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 So with the planet, with your saying, I know this is something very interesting, and it really like there's so many branches that go off of Mormonism. It's just really, I think it's one of the craziest religions out there,
Yeah.
especially
You don't
being
say.
yeah. And so that's why I have to be careful with my wordings too and stuff, and not like there's certain things where like I'm not going to go into something that I'm not fully educated on. I will only tell you what my experience and my truth is,
Sure.
as well as the research I've done while being in the church and that kind of jazz. I'm not going to go off topic and say, well, I think it's like this in terms of endowments. I think it's like this. Um, Actually, going back to, I know, again, I don't want to go back and forth here. I will keep that in mind in terms of the planet. But baptizing for the dead, the Mormon church did get in trouble for that because we were taking names that we're supposed to get permission for, but we didn't. And the Jewish community picked up on this. And we were actually baptizing those that were part of the Holocaust. They were Holocaust victims. And imagine you're taking one of their names and saying, no, I want them to be Mormon. It's like, wow, that's a big hit there. So they got in trouble. And that year was 1994, where the Holocaust victims were being introduced in these baptisms for the dead. That's something I just wanted to throw in there as well. But going back to the planet here, there was this, now they call it a theory because it's just, that's what happens with Mormonism. They'll run with a narrative until it kind of starts to slow down and things are changing, and then you're going, okay, no, this sounds a little more crazy than real life sort of thing. And then they'll say, well, no, that was just a theory, that was just word of mouth, that really wasn't it, even though we have pre-recordings of someone that's high up saying, yes, they'll mention something about it and you go, oh, that's where I got the idea from. This isn't just a rumor per se. But they used to say that if you could make it to the celestial kingdom, which is the highest kingdom, you would then become a god of your own and create your own worlds. That you would have, it went from multiple wives and then just, your wife on earth. But they had that polygamy sense, thinking, no, you could be a polygamist in heaven, mating with all these women and creating life on earth, so to speak. And yeah, you're creating your own world because you're becoming like God the Father, who is, the one who created us. So it is a little crazy out there. And
Well, it's a little like the 17 virgins,
Yeah, and I'm sure the wife's not real thrilled about it. I gotta say, I think it's really fitting that you're a cartoon character in this interview.
yes, yeah, yeah, that's the South Park version of Joseph Smith. And the reason why, a lot of people kind of laugh at, South Park and they kind of make fun of things. But what really happens in terms of that Mormon episode within South Park is they show the real truth about Joseph Smith and how he kind of goes along and invents this religion. And then you have the Mormon church, where its members didn't even know some of the information they exposed. And then they have to release it after this episode because so many people are asking questions.
I
One of
didn't
the
realize
things is,
well, the same guys
yeah,
did the whole the play.
correct, the musical.
Right.
Yeah, that was
Yes,
controversial.
No, I just yeah,
yes,
it's cool that it had an impact in the real world.
Yeah.
absolutely. People were asking questions. Is this really true? And then you have people saying, actually it is. And one of those big things was Joseph Smith translating from the golden plates by looking into his top hat with seer stone and translating, which just doesn't make any sense
Sounds
at all,
legit. Why not?
right?
Kind of like
So
you're forbidden from drinking Coke. You can't drink Coke. It'll offend God. And then there was an update. Wait, we just bought Coke.
We're making a
We
lot of money
prefer
off
you
it.
stick to Diet Coke, but now it's okay. Drink the Coke.
Oh yes, and it's
We bartended in Utah,
At the
and
time, I think.
I'll tell you, bartend a Mormon wedding at like what 10,000 feet, and you try to pour a Diet Coke. It takes like 5 minutes,
Oh, it's
and you
horrible.
got a line with 20 people. They all want a Diet Coke. It's yeah. Sorry, just venting.
no, and it, it gets really ridiculous that way. It gets super confusing. I think they'd actually rather have you confused and just follow order rather than like ask all these questions, because then you're just in a big whirlwind of like information. You're like, what do I do anymore? And that's one of the things I like to say. If Joseph Smith was around at this time and age, he would not be able to be a member of his own church because of the rules that have been changed. And
Oh.
especially especially Brigham Young. There's no way. But yet there's a statue of BYU, you know, kind of showing, oh, he's our second prophet to the Mormon Church, and he was so good. But again, and I'll go into these kind of scenarios here. Um, so yeah, kind of moving forward with my background. Hopefully, I gave you kind of enough information there that
Oh, this is great.
Yeah.
Keep going.
yeah, I've been through the temple endowments, the temple ceilings, kind of to be where I need to be at the celestial kingdom to reside with God. But then after those types of rituals, you really start to question things because you feel icky. There's in our moral compass, it's kind of going haywire, thinking, well, everyone thinks it's okay. When I look around, no one's laughing. My wife broke out laughing when we went through the endowment ceremony because of how ridiculous it was.
And you just
And
have
I'm looking at her thinking, oh my goodness, she's mocking God here or something. Me
Wait,
taking it
I have
serious.
to ask real quick. When you say the endowment ceremonies, was she thinking it was something else?
Yeah, yeah. Well, we go through this temple prep class that doesn't really prep you. They just say, well, we're not supposed to tell you anything. So you
Right.
still have to go there. Again, they've kind of changed that within these temples. They do give you a little more information. Um, because before, when we went in, they would say, if anyone chooses to leave now, they may go. Okay, but why would I leave? And then you go through the thing and you go, well, now I know why I would leave, right? Because this is so weird and cultish, and it just seems real off from what God would have you do. But you have these trusting figures around you. So yeah, and so that's really what I wanted to go with my background, is to kind of go through those little elements, not to really go heavy into them, because I don't think that should be the biggest issue here. There's so much to Mormonism that I want to get to, in terms of that you can tell that it's coming from a true source, not necessarily someone who just kind of joined and then left.
Right,
No, I have
exactly.
tons of experience with this,
You
and
put
I'm gonna.
decades into this.
and you just have the
Yeah.
one wife, right?
Yes. Yes, correct. And then that's something funny I'll add on to here.
When you
Um,
were the temple, are you referring to the temple in Salt Lake, or was this a different temple?
this is a different temple. Yeah, because I'm in
I
Canada.
gotta say, Salt Lake, the best parts really are the Mormon contribution, architecturally speaking. They spent
Yes.
money on. I mean, it's beautiful,
Yeah,
architect.
it's approximately, they have an estimate of, I mean, this could be a different number now. This is the number I knew back in COVID time, like 2020. It takes about 7 to 8 million to build a temple. They're building temples all over the world. The only reason why they started in Canada, which is there's actually in Cardston, Alberta, and that's because polygamy was huge back in the day. And Brigham Young, who was the second prophet to the church, said, "Flee to Canada so that we can continue practicing polygamy." Right? And so the Canadian laws weren't as strict as the American laws, and that's why everyone traveled up through Alberta into Cardston, and that was the very first temple of Canada, in Cardston there. And it's very much like the Solomon's Temple, very different in terms of the other temples that are around now. But again, very expensive to build. They go all out with their temples. Um, yeah, so that was more so for a polygamy view, because Brigham Young always said, you're not going to get to the celestial kingdom unless you are a big practice, you practice polygamy, that sort of thing. They were big into it.
Wow.
Um, so yeah, that was kind of the thing in terms of that. But yeah, getting into now the core, like the real juice here that I want to expose here, I'll kind
Mm.
of give everyone just kind of an idea of Joseph Smith. And I really, a lot of people again kind of write us off like if you've left the church, well, you're just spewing out this anti-Mormon type hateful behavior. I am not about that. The emotional aspect in terms of Mormonism, I've taken time. It's taken a lot of energy, a lot of open mindfulness in terms of the subject, because whenever you discover something, you research more in the advantage of the church, not going against it. You don't follow a path that, like where you want to discredit the church right away, because all of your life, all your meaning towards your life is involved with the church. So why would I want to continue to discredit it when really I just want to know the truth behind it,
Right.
whether it discredits it or gives credit to it. And that was something that I had to discover on my own. My wife brought that to my attention. She was worried about the LGBTQ community and how they're treated, and how Utah is one of the highest in terms of suicide rates, due to this reason of them not being accepted by their own family because they would prefer to choose the Mormon religion over them, even though they're all about family. So it's just this twisted kind of thing, right? Um, so yeah, let me get a little bit into Joseph Smith here for those who are kind of not clear in terms of what Mormonism is, because the whole thing is a mixed basket, and they like to change the narrative all the time. But I will just go with straight fact in terms of Joseph Smith and kind of where he got to in terms of the church. And it will be a light summary, not a full disclosure, because it really takes a lot of time to talk about these sort of things. Um, but like I said, I highly recommend RFM or Bill Reel, their Mormonism Live, because they go into each segment and they're like 2 hours long. They have tons of shows on it
Okay.
that really help the listener understand more where this information is coming from. So I'll just start first with Joseph Smith's background. A lot of people say he was uneducated. I do not believe that for 1 second. I know that they had copies of the Bible within their home because they did follow religion at that time. And but the one thing that is true, that which is with the church's narrative, is that they experienced extreme poverty. Now, back in the day, this was been in the late 1800s. You don't have things like internet. You don't have certain communication. It's really based on your town, on where you're living in, like a village or something, right? So Joseph Smith, being in that extreme poverty, he was one to tell stories that was very popular back then, which was known as folklore. Folklore was kind of this thing would engage the person, and it really like this mystical kind of experiencing. Wow, is that true? Or like, is there elves or that sort of thing? Joseph Smith would kind of go off on his topic, and because he's so good with his words, he captivated an audience because of it. And a lot of the stuff he would talk about is in terms of the Bible. The Bible is something they had access to. It was free, that they could obtain as well as everyone else. So he studied it. Um, Now, there is a theory that his father, who supposedly was an alcoholic, was also a part time teacher. So there again, it kind of goes against like, was this guy like, was he kind of had like this fourth grade knowledge sort of thing, being older than that, or was it the fact that they just kind of stoop it down to say, oh no, he was uneducated. Of course, there's no way he could come up with this type of information, and that's where you kind of have to decipher between. But moving forward with that, really, he only had one working brother within the family who provided any sort of income. Any income that they did obtain, Joseph Smith's father, Joseph Smith Sr., then invested in the ginseng business. who he thought he would make tons of money off of, but then ended up getting scammed out of, which then really sent them down in terms of poverty. And then so because of that, it's like, well, how do we make a living? What do we do? There's a lot of emotions that can come with poverty. You get depressed, you get envious of those that have more than you. Your mind can start to go in many different places if you're hungry, and you're not, you're malnourished, sort of thing. So from the research that I've gathered from the church, this is a case where extreme poverty was at play, and that he did use the stories for his advantage to capture others. Now, the transition from that is he went from folklore to, no, I'm actually telling the truth here. And this isn't just a mythical story that I'm talking about. This is something that I received from God. And so, what the story and the like, from what I know and from what the church tells, it is similar in the sense that he grows up as this kind of like this farmer kid sort of thing, um,
Did you
and
say
that
ginseng farmer? Was ginseng?
well, yeah, well, maybe not necessarily a farmer per se. I just know that that was very typical in terms of your job title back then. You're like either a farmer or you're a miner, or you're like within trades, teacher. These are certain like the occupations that they had.
Yeah, I'm just
Now I
thinking
don't know,
it's not a typical crop. So
not
I just want
exact.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Not
So
with multiple wives, but
yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, so what would happen is Joseph Smith then went in. So this is where really the beginning starts with Mormonism. This is what's most talked about. He went into the forest. I think he was around 14 or something, early teen. He prayed. He went on his knees and he prayed to God. What religion should I follow? I want to know the truth. And so what happened is he felt the essence of Satan surrounding him. They said it's like a strong darkness where his body goes tense and, really trying to captivate the reader, whoever's listening to the story, like, wow, he was really tempted by Satan. Almost like when you go back to the Old Testament and they saw, it's similar to Moses' story where Moses was confronted by Satan and then he's feeling all this, hardship or whatnot. And then it's fully released when God comes into the picture and goes, oh, okay, good. I am saved, sort of thing. So, not to say that he stole that, but it's very similar in that sort of, storytelling. And then what happens is that darkness then disappears from Joseph Smith as he's praying. He goes into then God and Jesus Christ coming down in a spiritual form and to preaching to Joseph Smith. Now, most people will say that when he saw God and when he saw Jesus at the same time, they were identical to each other. They like the Jesus and God were almost like twins per se. Now, what's very confusing is that they have many interpretations of this. First, they say, "Oh no, it was like maybe it was an angel that visited, maybe it was something else." No, they weren't identical, And so there's about 10 different versions, I think, of it, but the majority will go to the main translation that they are identical when he saw them. And God and Jesus instructed Joseph Smith personally to create this certain religion, which would be known as Mormonism, that would be the true religion on the earth, and that he would establish is what Jesus Christ meant to establish, back in the day. And so he took this to the township people or whatnot, and this is where South Park really does a good job of with that episode. Is you see Joseph Smith kind of going through the town and saying, I met with Jesus and God, and they told me this to, kind of go with this religion. And because, again, like, what resources do you have? A lot of people would just trust those and kind of go by word of mouth. And since Joseph Smith is really good with his words, people started to follow him, started getting a following in terms of this, right? So this is kind of the start of Joseph Smith. Now, he did get in trouble by the courts, by the law. He was breaking certain rules. He was, even though the church doesn't like to say this, he was a con man. 100% he was a con man. He would, in order to make money prior to this, creating a religion, he would go to miners and say, hey, listen, I know, like, I have this spiritual gift where I can see treasure within the ground. And I'll tell you where to dig for a small fee. And I will guarantee you that you will find that treasure. For whatever reason, and I'm telling you, this guy must have been good with his words, but for whatever reason, they believed him. And they dug, and it would take all day, sometimes multiple days, to get to where they need to go. And right when they're saying, well, they're getting doubtful, saying, we're not finding anything here, we just keep digging, Joseph Smith would say, oh, I just received this, that an angel moved your treasure to this location, and now
Oh,
we must go here. So, it's so odd, because you think nowadays, like, if someone were to say this to you, you'd be like, dude, you're crazy. I wouldn't even pay someone to begin with.
or if they said they're going to minors, I would think of Joe Biden, and it could have been a completely different version of
Yes.
the term.
Yeah, exactly, right. Um, so yeah, he then got in trouble by the law, and then he knew he had to kind of change courses. And for whatever reason, they then believed about him seeing God and Jesus in the forest. He then was instructed later, at night, when everyone was asleep within his home, it was just him for whatever reason, no one awoke except for him, the angel Moroni. Now, this is different from Captain Moroni. This is Angel Moroni, who's like kind of up there with, like, I would say, like, Archangel Michael, Gabriel, those sort of angels that are like high figured, very up there with God. So Angel Moroni shown up in his room and awoke him from sleep to say, to give him more instructions in terms of, where to find these golden plates. That is a missing, recorded, um, from back in, the times of, just after Jesus Christ's death, so AD, where the begin the Nephites and the Lamanites, which are like natives. You have one that's Northern Territory, one Southern Territory. So all this history that's been forgotten from our civilization is recorded on these golden plates. And so the angel instructs Joseph Smith, okay, this is where you're going to find, and keeps visiting him throughout the night. And then so he tells his family. He's then encouraged to go out there, and I don't know if how much he was digging, because he's really, like, obviously, it's quite deceiving in terms of these things. But he says he finds them, and then when he goes into the village to tell all these people, I found these plates, and it has the lost records of our history and things that happened, where even Jesus Christ visited North America after he resurrected after the third day. People are like, whoa, what the heck? And so you're either against them. It was kind of like a black and white scenario. You're either against something, this guy's a nut job, or you're with them thinking, oh my goodness, like, this must be legit. But a lot of people are asking, where's the golden plates? Oh, well, I can't expose them because they're secret, and
Oh,
I'd be punished if I were to show these plates, right?
oh,
Not to mention that the weight of gold is very heavy. So if you have plates of gold, that you just throw in your backpack, that's going to be a lot that
yeah,
you're carrying in terms of that. And even high golden plates, like, come on, give me a break here. But let's just go with the narrative here that, yeah, he did find the plates or whatnot. Now, how is he going to fund a church? How is he? And this whole idea of him making a church is that so it could be profitable. Okay. Because again, he's experiencing extreme poverty
right.
that he wants to come out of. And it's not like he wants to lift a finger and do yard work or something. No, he knows he's good with his words. He knows he can get people to believe him.
Well, he
And
knows
so
where
if he,
the treasure is, so he could just go dig it up and fund his church, right?
Yeah.
yeah, right. And so what he then goes to, Martin Harris, I believe is his name is. He was a wealthy farmer, and he was able to get at least one of those wealthy farmers, which was him, to provide funding in order to start this religion. Now, Joseph Smith made it seem to Martin Harris that he would get all his money back plus some, and
Oh,
that he'd be even more wealthy than he is because it'd be very profitable. And this is what God calls upon him. So it's all in favor of Joseph Smith in a kind of like what he's thinking, but he's going, oh no, I'm going to use God as my selling product. And knowing that people don't have certain information because we are in the late 1800s, like they're going to question me a lot less than if, we had the technology nowadays
right.
and, we're discovering certain things. And so it's just a different time frame, and I guess there's a certain ignorance that came with that, I guess, so to speak. People's motives or thought process was a little different than what we would
Yeah,
hope to
you
evolve
can't
into.
just look up what it is that they're referring to. And I think on,
Exactly.
on this note, because we're right about an hour and we have an event we have to get to, but let's we'll stop this one here, and then we have plenty more to go into down the road. But is there anything you want to say in closing for now, and maybe just we can go over the topics of where we know where we're cutting this off. That we just talked about the foundation of this and where he got his money, so we know where we're leaving people off it. But is there anything you want to say in closing, SJ?
Yeah. I what I'll say in closing is, I'll just get through Joseph Smith because I'm pretty much there in terms of that, and then
Sure.
Brigham Young. It'll just be a quick kind of summary there. I know I've kind of gone a little bit further into Joseph Smith,
No, you're
but
good.
again, because there's just so much information to it, it's hard to kind of go through these quickly
Exactly.
without, someone who's not a Mormon to really fully kind of get where this is, how it all started, so to speak. Um, but yeah, I'll end it with the prophets here. And then if we do another segment here, we can definitely get into the more nitty gritty, like racism,
Oh
how
yeah.
they treat the LGBTQ community, the changes that have kind of gone, and even that you have to be paying tithing 10%, even just to be considered into the celestial kingdom because you won't get your temple recommend. So
And
yeah, there's a lot towards that, but yeah, let me just end it off with Joseph Smith. What pretty much happened in terms of this is he got someone to fund his church. There was a lot of problems he had obviously had to face. One of them being Emma Smith's dad, which is his uh, future father-in-law, because he marries Emma Smith, and they become, a married couple. And how he didn't approve of Joseph Smith and how he was deceiving people. So there were people that were picking up on this, and that's why he kept moving back and forth, because he kept getting in trouble and people were seeing through his lies. So it's not like everyone is kind of dumbfounded here. There are those that kind of rebelled against him, and that's why he even got tarred and feathered. Even though they say, oh, he was just spreading the gospel. No, he got tarred and feathered because he then started to marry people that were underage, age 14 and up. And Emma Smith had no idea that he was marrying young girls. He was sending off um, married, people that were together, that were married husband and wife, and send the man to a mission somewhere very far away, and then marry the wife and even the daughters of that family, just to say that, hey, if you want to be with your family together, God has called on to me to be, for us to be sealed together. And Emma Smith would get mad and furious, and it just, I think she went on a, kind of a downhill from there, because all the things she experienced with this guy who's manipulating people and deceiving those in
Wow.
order for his own selfish needs. This is something that I think is very important in terms of Joseph Smith.
That's
That,
huge. Oh my
yeah, and
god.
then she
I
found some silver bullets. And she
right?
well, I was told real quickly by a Mormon friend, or well, ex raised in the Mormon world anyway, that there was a period of history where it was legal to shoot Mormons. Is that? Have you ever heard of that?
Um, well, I do know that they had like this military that did support, like he started to get a lot of money because his members, like his following, started getting bigger and bigger, and he would move around so much that, word wouldn't get out that he was deceiving members, that he's creating his own currency, because he needed the money. So he'd be like, give me real currency, I'll give you my fake, bank currency, but it'll be good for the village. You can still use that within this area. Meanwhile, he's scamming all these people, he's lying to people. Um, and so, yeah, it really just comes down to him. His needs were to be a polygamist. He wanted to marry more than one, didn't matter what Emma Smith said. And he was marrying underage girls and married women. And to say that he didn't have sexual relations with these types of people doesn't make any sense, because there are accounts where he has been caught by certain members that were up in technically in that leadership role, that then left the church because they knew what he was doing behind
Right.
closed doors. And so that's where it kind of, the rise and fall of Joseph Smith. But then Brigham Young, Joseph Smith he died as a mature, so they say, because he was in a jail cell, and everyone stormed the jail while he's trying to defend himself in the Book of Mormon. Well, obviously the Mormon Church leaves out the fact that no, he's marrying all these women and all his family, and not being truthful but deceiving. And so you had this raging mob come in and storm the jail cell because they were thinking of even maybe letting him go. So there's just a lot of sort of that deception, I guess, that's included. Brigham Young, once Joseph Smith died from that assassination from the mob, Brigham Young then took over the church. And then he introduced, he was against slavery, then he was with it. He was a huge believer in polygamy, huge in the blood atonements. And what I'll end it here with in our segment is I'll just give just a good highlight of how Brigham Young was the second prophet of the Mormon Church. There's two quotes here, and this you can actually find on the LDS website, which is Church of Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormon Church. You can find this information. You have to dig deep, but I have it all kind of referenced here. So it's two quotes in total, and this is coming straight from Brigham Young to his members. He says, "Will you love your brothers and sisters likewise when they have committed a sin that cannot be atoned for without the shedding of their blood? Will you love that man or woman well enough to shed their blood? That is what Jesus Christ meant."
Whoa.
So he's saying Jesus Christ's blood is not enough, that you must shed your own blood in order for you to be forgiven. And that is from Brigham Young, Desert News, April 16th, 1856. That's the reference there. You can look at Desert News, which is part of the church. That's the date there, and that is directly from Brigham Young. The last quote here.
Sacrifice going on there. That's
exactly it. Blood atonements. So you atone for your bloodshed. That's the only way you're going to be forgiven, not through Jesus Christ, because he's kind of deceiving them, saying, Jesus Christ did this, but that alone will not be enough to save you. So you must shed your own blood down.
Sounds like Baal.
Wow. That's crazy.
And then the last quote here
go ahead. Oh, that's right.
"If you want to know what to do with a thief that may find stealing, I say kill him on the spot and never suffer him to commit another iniquity. I will prove by my works whether I can out of justice to such persons or not. I would consider it just as much my duty to do that as to baptize a man for the remission of his sins." So again, he's saying it is best to kill that thief right on the spot, to shed that blood, rather than to, find another alternative. And this is just as important as baptizing a man for remission of his sins.
Wow.
That again, Journal of Discourses, Volume 1, pages 108 to 109, Prophet Brigham Young. So this is nothing I'm making up.
Right.
And I hope I've given your listeners a kind of just a yeah, foundation, exactly. That's the perfect word I'm looking for, to say that I'm not full of it, that this is my experiences, my background that I've gone through, but also this is kind of where the church started with Joseph Smith, what his intentions were, and then what Brigham Young's intentions were, and the type of extreme views that they had in order to keep people in order because they didn't want people rebelling against the church like they did to Joseph Smith. And
Wow.
it gets to a point where even we have Mormonism until now. This is something that has survived since then. Even with those all said, they still believe that these are a prophet of God. And I want to shoot that down to say, no, I've been involved with this church. I I know what it's like to be a Mormon. I know what it's like to go through these temple ceremonies. And I'm telling you right now, we need to expose these secrets that they keep because it affects more people than you would ever think.
Oh
You
yeah.
know,
My
and
joke about killing a drifter wasn't too far off, now was it?
No.
right?
Yeah. Wow.
Wow. Well, this has been very educational. I think the viewers will agree, and yeah, I think we can delve further down this rabbit hole and get into some other topics. I know you have some information on the someone that was part of the Illuminati as well. Um,
Yep, a little more on the magic underwear. I mean, we got a lot to cover in part two. So
Oh yes,
buckle up, audience,
yes.
and
The
join.
facts of you mentioning that we get our own planet. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness, the facts of that Joseph Smith, there's tall people on the moon. That God uses our worlds as His footstep because it's furthest away from heaven. That's why we don't age as much. Whereas there's a planet known Kolob, which is closest to heaven, where these people live much longer and they're more, I guess, attuned with how God wants things. So a lot of, again, it's kind of confusing because it's just like they kind of pick from thin air to kind of get you that
yeah.
hook to get you interested in. um, and then I think there's one other thing I wanted to mention. What was it? Oh yes, Cain from the Bible is known to be Bigfoot. um, and then I definitely have some images to share in terms of the Nauvoo Temple, which is still up today. It's been restored with the pentagrams
Oh.
that Mormons claim Adam to be the Archangel Michael. Um, and then also, too, just the artist's interpretation of Joseph Smith and how he views the plates and how no artist could get it right, even if they are hired by the church and it goes through the first presidency of the leaders to approve this, because you see him looking at plates, then you see a sheet covered the plates, he's looking into a hat, then he has a seer stone, then he has a sheet that's in between him and the interpreter. There's just so many types of how he's translated into the Book of Mormon. And I have visuals for that. So that would be very helpful as well to kind of show that and go from there. But yeah, I hope I've given enough in terms of my background to know that, my full purpose here is just to share truth. And that's why I've come to you guys in terms of this. And I like what you guys are doing in terms of sharing truth. Let the listener decide on their own. If they want to research anything that I'm saying, I am more than happy for them to look into it and to discover on their own kind of way. And CS letter, if you type that into Google, will give you very good indication of differences between the Bible and the Book of Mormon, because there really isn't much. There's some word for word, even a full chapter in some cases, very similar. There's one page where it reads exactly the same, which I'm surprised no one even brings up. But yeah, these are certain things that it's very important, even for non members, to know, because these cults, they have certain agendas within our society, and it all leads up to the bigger cults. And so much deceiving going on. Our world is, like I said, is upside down, and we need to get down to the truth. And that is why I will explain, the best to my knowledge, the truth that I've experienced as well as know. and only go from there. I will not go into certain sections where I'm not 100% of, um, because I don't want that source to be questionable. I want people to really know, okay, this is an actual problem, not something that we should just dismiss because it's weird. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, thank you. Well,
Well,
we're
thanks so much.
yeah, we'll be in touch with you in a couple weeks. We got some traveling and stuff we're doing. So, but it's been very enlightening and intriguing and at times humorous. So, thank you so much for sharing this information. We'll follow up in a few weeks or so.
Yeah, I'm excited
Perfect.
for it too.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, SJ.
No problem.
All right. Take care.